Well, guess what time it is? It's time to get it poppin'. Let's get it poppin'. That's the show. This is me. I'm Izlain. That's Gator over there. We are doing something I've done on my other podcast and on their podcast and yada yada. It's something that people do all the time. It's a deck tech for one of my personal decks. It's what I played in the last Common Cause. And, well, I can't really, without just reading off of a monologue and, having kind of a boring video where I talk to the camera by myself, I can't really ask questions about the deck and things like that. So I asked Gator to come on and essentially interview me so that I could share about this deck, but, again, not sound like I'm just talking to myself. So, with that said, Gator, hello, welcome. Welcome to my sort of podcast thing that I'm doing for Pauper stuff.
What is up, my bro? Thank you for having me. Really appreciate you asking me to come on and do this with you.
No problem. I've already had Kunksy Boy on here a couple times, and I've already reached out to Rohan trying to get him to come on for a different discussion that Franklin also said that he'd probably be good at. But with that said, Gator's got some questions for me. We are talking about the deck in question, which will be in the show notes, is my colorless monstrosity, aka the Glaring Fleshraker. So I guess I'll read that off real quick and throw it up on the screen here just so we know what we're talking about. And then I'll let Gator take over. So Glaring Fleshraker is a 2/2 for 2 generic and 1 colorless. Granted, generic and colorless are essentially the same thing, though if a pip like that denoting true colorless exists, you must use something that provides true colorless, whatever the case. The whole deck's colorless, so it doesn't really matter here. But in other decks, that actually is a thing. So it is a creature Eldrazi drone. It says whenever you cast a colorless spell, create a 0/1 colorless Eldrazi spawn creature token with sacrifice this creature, add colorless. It also has a second line of text that says whenever another colorless creature enters the battlefield under your control, Glaring Fleshraker deals 1 damage to each opponent. So you can already see that it kind of leads you in a certain direction in the sense that, well, it's colorless, so all the spells you're casting are going to be colorless. But then it rewards you for those spells. Essentially is a cost reducer because it provides a mana back to you in the form of a body that can be used to make even more mana with, say, an Ashnod's Altar. Other things can be sacked for various things. Gets you some, edict protection, as long as it's not a non-token, which those ones are. They exist as well. And then at any time you cast that spell and that creature enters, you ping the table symmetrically for 1 damage, which is, I think, the most important part. But that's the card. We're going to talk about the deck. Gator, what do you got for me?
All right, man. So I want to start with some of the most generic things first with a deck like this. But before we even go there, I wanted to kind of present this with you. So this creature specifically, and like a deck like this one, I have been wrong about in the past. I've made content before about how I have no faith in this commander. Essentially, when I saw you and a few other people play the deck, I realized how wrong I was with the way the deck plays. Because my initial thought process with a deck like this specifically was, it's going to do 15 damage to everybody and gas itself out, and then just sit there and watch the rest of the table play. And for my initial outlook, I watched the deck play a few times, and it did exactly what I thought it would. But then when individuals like yourself actually started diving into the deck a lot more, there's much more to the deck than I thought. So I'm really happy that you actually had me on here to talk about that, because I really wanted to make that known, because I've spoken with a few community members where I was very, very down on this commander specifically, but I have definitely changed my mind about it. To get into the nitty-gritty, the first and easiest question I have to ask you is, how does it win? Are you trying to combo off? Are you trying to storm turn? Are you just playing perilous mirrors one at a time? What is the game plan in just how you win the game specifically?
You should be able to draw a natural kind of correlation between this deck and Arabella, which was the deck I played in the tournament before, and also was one of the people who tried to push it forward as far as being a good deck because of that symmetrical damage. Now, granted, Arabella requires different setup, so it is a different deck. Obviously, it's in different colors, blah, blah, blah. So it's not like a 1-to-1, but it is similar enough to where I thought it was innocuous enough to where people would look at it and go exactly what you said, go, oh, it's just going to burn all of its cards and then sit there and do nothing, so who cares? We're not scared of this. And then people left me alone until I started putting chunks of damage on them, because it really ends up being fairly aggressive, and due to some of the cards in the list, you play a card, you get the mana back, because, like, say it's a 1-drop, you play a 1-drop colorless spell, you get the mana back, plus you get a body, plus you ping the table for 1, and then you can sack that thing, potentially, to draw a card. And then the process continues. So it is what I like to call it a manual storm deck, because it is non-deterministic. There's no way to make an infinite, well, there is a way to make an infinite, but just on its face, there's no way to guarantee that you're always going to draw a card that you can now play to continue going through a storm turn. However, I have had it where I dropped 5 colorless spells, put 5 Eldrazi's on the field, used a couple of them to pay for more stuff, and, ping the table for 6 or 7 damage all in one fell swoop, while accumulating a bunch of value and still having like 6 cards in hand at the end of that turn. And people are like, "What the fuck, dude?" I'm like, "Yeah, this is what happens when you get down to the nitty gritty of it." But so it is kind of attrition, but it also does have a combo as well.
Let me interrupt you here real quick. So I let me see if I'm gathering what you're saying here correctly. So I hear that you're saying it's a bit of a manual storm deck, but it also has some ways to do like enable some combos and things of that nature. Because I'm an old fogey and I know a lot of decks from the past. Would you consider this kind of like a Second Sunrise Eggs deck? I know not everybody might not know what Second Sunrise is, but essentially what a deck like that from way, 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 way back in the day was just kind of a manual storm deck that used eggs, cards, for instance, like Chromatic Star, Terrarion, things of that nature, to pop them and continue the process of just kind of powering through your deck. It sounds like that's essentially what you're doing. Am I wrong with the thought of you're not trying to do your whole deck, you're just like looking for value, playing a card after another card, and creating a board state? Is that kind of a good way to look at it?
So, I mean, that's like the bare bones plan. Yeah, it's just to, dig through your deck, burn people out, that sort of thing. But in the meantime, you can be building towards a combo. And because the deck does churn pretty well, you can sometimes get to the combo. First game it ever won in a tournament, I won with the combo. And the combo, if you're interested in that part, is it's Mirror Retriever, it's and Workshop Assistant, which are both creatures that when they die, you return an artifact from graveyard to hand. One's a 2-drop, the other is a 3-drop. Now, you also need a sack outlet for this to work. Usually that's going to be like Ashnod's Altar, but I did pack in a couple creatures that also just like say sacrifice an artifact or regenerate this creature or whatever. They're not good cards, but they're there for the redundancy. Basically what you end up doing is you cast the Mirror Retriever, it creates the body from Fleshraker, and because it's colorless, it pings the table for 2. Then with some sort of sack outlet, either Ashnod's, you make 2 mana from it, and then you can use that 2 mana plus the body you were made from Glaring Fleshraker to then cast the Mirror Enforcer, then sack it, and then that cast, and then so on and so forth to where you create a loop to where you burn the table out. Now, this combo has existed before, but it usually required
Foundry Inspector.
Yes. So I am running Foundry Inspector because it turns out 1-drop eggs for free, pretty good, and I think I have about 15 to 20 1-drop eggs, so yeah, getting those for free is great. And this helps the combo, but it's not necessary because your commander actually creates the body that can be sacked for mana on its face. So it's just a loop of casting those spells over and over again. You burn out the table, you win the game. And I got to pull that off in my first tournament win with it, so that was pretty cool.
Very cool. If you guys are wondering, I know Izlain will be more than happy to do this. We'll put down in the show notes below, we'll just put like the cards that you need specifically for each variation of that combo, because it's like he said, it's not just Foundry Inspector, Workshop, and the Mirror. You actually could use different variations with the Commander or with Ashnod's or with the Thermo Navigator. So what I'm hearing is you have a lot of layering effects, which that's kind of really unique for colorless, in my opinion. But I have to ask you, my next question, which still pertains to how it wins specifically, is like, I see some fatties in the list, man. Like, I'm looking at cards like Mirror Enforcer, Surgeon's Companion, Eldrazi Devastator. I'm going to sound a little bit mean here for a moment, but are you even able to cast something like that? That seems ridiculous. They're like 7, 8, 9, 8 mana creatures. Is that like realistic? Are they there for fluff? Like, what are they doing?
So you would think that, and I've played other decks where I've tried to cram these in as finishers and never really had much success casting them or anything like that. I've hard cast the 7 and 8 drops easy in a later game state. You can make so many mirrors throughout time. Also, a lot of the creatures in the deck can provide mana. Well, obviously, the commander itself is just making you mana. So if you're just casting stuff and you're not sacking those Eldrazi's and they're just stacking up, if you've got 6 of them and 2 other mana, there you go. Easy as cake. And then now you have an Ulamog's Crusher or something, and that's going to put in some work. I've had to pivot like that too, where I wasn't churning as well. I wasn't getting a lot of the card draw, which is why in earlier iterations, I had to add a little bit more of the card draw effects just to kind of smooth it out. But yeah, but there were times where it's just you're not drawing as much as you'd like, you're not storming as much as you'd like, you're not doing that much, and you're just like, okay, well, here's an 8-drop Maelstrom Colossus. Let's see what happens. And that'll probably flip into an egg, which isn't great, but it doesn't really matter. You do now have a big body that can do some work.
So you kind of alluded to my next question for you specifically. Since you did, let's talk about it. How does this deck pivot? And you kind of already said you get to play these big fatties, which on the surface don't seem realistic, but you kind of just described how easy it is to actually get some of these out there. So going with the pivot plan, so you could throw big fatties out there. I see even on your smaller creatures, though, they're not just all vanilla creatures. You have dorks, you have creatures that sack and do things. Do you mind elaborating on that? What more of a pivot plan do you have than just going egg into my deck? You have these big fatties that I see, and as weird as it sounds, you would expect a lot of these creatures to be, quote, vanillas, but they're really not. So there are a lot of colorless options in this format. Obviously, there are more commons than any other rarity of card. So there was a lot to look through. I will say I had to spend a long time going through all of the options. And at first, I just put everything that had anything on it. I didn't want any vanillas. I purposely did not want vanillas outside of the Ulamog's Crush. It's not even vanilla. It's got Annihilator. They all have some sort of keyword. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. They all have something. Which is pretty cool.
I wanted everything to do something beyond just existing or being there to make Fleshraker triggers. I wanted everything. So basically it was how can I make more eggs? And they're just on creatures, essentially. And if they're not an egg, they activate for mana. They can be sacked to go kind of find a land. If I'm running low on lands, Perilous Mirror, it just dies, pings off a 2-drop. And it's any target, so it can also just hit a player if you want to. The Filigree Familiar, it ETBs, gives you 2 life. That's another thing I found. Gaining life in this deck is huge. I think it's huge in any deck, but it kind of makes it feel more like Arabella in that regard, too. I found in one of my games, I got Campfire, and I activated I got it turn 1 and activated it every single turn and probably gained, 15, 20, or 14, 16 life, something like that over the course of the game. It kept me in the game because people were starting to see I was a threat and they started attacking me, and I was able to just keep myself alive by adding in all these little effects that gain you life. So, yeah, that's another important note. But yeah, I didn't want anything to be a dead card. I wanted to be happy about drawing any card in the deck and going, okay, maybe this isn't the exact thing I need right now, but it's gonna provide me value. And then the cool thing is with a lot of these, like a Universal Solvent, it's a shitty ass card. I would never play this in another deck. But because we can make so much mana, and because I was anticipating this was during the rule break month. That tournament, we were anticipating there being a lot of Planeswalkers, and there were not. But I was looking at removal, and I'm like, there is no way to remove stuff except for with these shitty cards. But when this card is a 1-drop, it makes you a body. It gets cast for free because it makes you that Eldrazi. It pings the table for 1, and then it sits there. So you play this turn 1, it's just sitting there. It's not doing nothing. But anytime anybody plays anything that's a threat, well, I'm going to blow that up. Sorry. So, and then other things that can do damage too, like Ninja's Kunai. You can equip it to a creature, then sacrifice it. It deals 3 damage to any target, bolting something for 1 mana. I mean, it essentially costs you 3 mana total, but over the course of time, who cares? I just found anything I could with utility. Also, for another good example, the Mirror Kinsmith can target or tutor up your Mirror Retriever. That's pretty cool. Yeah. That is the only tutor option I have, which sucks, but I actually used that to get to the combo because I drew the other pieces. So if that's the only piece, the other piece, it's basically another copy of one of your mirrors. So,
well, you seem to be really good at this, Izlain. You're really good at saying something that I'm about to ask you. So you did it to me a second time. All right. So we gotta we gotta calm down with that, Izlain. Just calm down a little bit.
Sorry,
Right.
it's I'm a host. What can I say?
Yep. You're good at this. So, the next question I have for you, which you started talking about as well, is removal. Now, I have to hit you with this one. I know when the average person sees colorless, the first thing that would come to their brain is you have 0. Or if you have anything, it's going to be hot garbage.
Scour from existence.
Yeah. So let's be honest. It might not be the best what you have in this deck, but do you even have any? And have you even used it in games? Like, tell me about the removal and why you chose certain cards. I know you said about the Planeswalkers for one, but would you even cut it? Because destroying is permanent, right?
It's permanent. Yeah, no, I wouldn't cut this. This is perfect for the deck. Yeah.
So elaborate that for me. If you
there's a lot. And there are other options too. Like I mentioned earlier, the Perilous Mirror, it dies. It can be sacrificed because you have plenty of ways to sacrifice stuff too. So this can be pointed removal. Otherwise, it's just a 1/1 that gets through because nobody wants to kill it because they don't want you to target their shit. Same with like the Ninja's Kunai. It's only a one-time thing, but it's a lightning bolt, and the lightning bolt's pretty good. It does cost more than I'd like, but on the lower end of things, there's stuff like Bear Trap, which is a fairly new card. It's a 1-mana artifact with flash, which is kind of cool. You can flash it in on somebody else's turn, and then have it there whatever you want. It costs 3 mana, sack it. It deals 3 damage to target creature. Goblin Firebomb. So the rest of these are kind of in this same sort of stack, I would say. They're all like 1-drops that can be sacked for 6 to 7 mana later on, but it is destroy target permanent. This one, Firebomb is 7, destroy target permanent.
You have a lot more stuff than I would ever give a colorless deck credit for. I'll be brutally honest with that one. I understand it's not like the flashiest, like Universal Solvent, right? 7 mana to pop a permanent. With the way you're talking about the deck, and even if I reference your creatures here, I mean, you have 1, 2, 3, 4 dorks right off the rip as soon as I see it. And your commander is just pumping out mana. So I really think that like asking the 7 mana is actually not that big of an ask like I thought earlier. Because even looking at, let's just say your mana base, like if you accidentally assemble Tron, like that's just freaking hilarious, right? I don't think you may ever will, you know, who knows? Maybe you slap in an expedition map if you're feeling spicy that day, but I found it to be very interesting. I really didn't think, like, even Urn of Godfire, like 6 mana, destroy target creature enchantment. That's actually incredibly relevant in our format.
The Bumbleflower Sharepot, such a weird ass name, but it's 5 mana and it'll destroy a non-land permanent. And you're not destroying lands usually anyway, unless you're playing against a Gretchen or another land tapper and you want to blow up a big land. That's the only downside of that card, but so many of these can hit any permanent, including lands. So that's why I liked them, because it was like, I can get rid of anything that's a problem. And you, wouldn't think that with colorless, but it literally has better removal than, like, every other fucking color. It's crazy, like, how many things are just non-land permanents, but they come at a cost. However, you're in fully colorless, so, like, every single mana dork, every single land, all tap for your color. So there's no limitation there. You don't have to worry about getting to 7 colorless to use the thing. You just get to 7 mana, period. And that can be done by turn 2. Turn 3, probably turn 3. Get your Fleshraker out. Turn 2, start churning out some spells. You're already got 3 lands. You've got a mana dork, and then you've created a thing. It's probably turn 4 more realistically, but like mid-game, and that's probably still considered early game, but mid-game you're already able to hit that 7 mana, no problem.
I do appreciate the incidental graveyard hate. The Tormod's Crypt and the Relic are just like in the deck to be in the deck, which I find to be awesome. Like,
had to do it. Right, yeah, you got to do it. There's so many cards that care about the graveyard these days.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. Another card, that Golem Foundry, is that part of the combo with this deck, or is that card specifically just because it helps you storm off and give you a bunch of free bodies?
I mainly put it in there just because it's extra bodies, but it did become relevant in one of the games where I actually made like 3 or 4 golems. over time. Wow. Yeah, because I got it kind of fairly early and nobody did anything about it. So it was just like, okay, well, I'm doing this. I'm making Eldrazi's, and then I'm making golems on top of it. Like, I guess that could be part of a if you had the combo, but you're just winning by draining things out. It would just add to that, I suppose. As in between, you're adding the counters, remove them, so every like third cast of one of the mirrors, or the retriever or the workshop assistant, every third cast you get an extra body. So it would speed the process up, but it's not necessary.
So that kind of brings me to a few more questions for you. So going through the list, I do see that you have a few updated cards from our newest set, Aether Drift. Have you been through a lot of variations with this deck at this point? So it seems like you didn't just like slap this together and go, look, it's done. Let's do a deck tech. It appears like you've played it in a tournament. I know you've been playing it over on Thursdays in the Common Theory. You've been actually doing really well over there playing this deck, even against like Malcolms and Gretchens and stuff, which is very impressive. I know you've been playing the deck quite a bit, and you're really trying to figure out all its little key points and aspects and whatnot. So how many variations have you been through thus far? Like 2 or 3 or...
Yeah, so I did what you said. I slapped it together and said, this looks good, and then I went and played it either on your server or on Sanctuary, maybe both. Played a couple games and went, it's missing something. And then I did a fine-tooth comb, like, look over on it, and I was like, I can remove this card, that card, whatever card. And I added in some more card draw, like more stuff. Also, I think I added in more removal, because at first I want to say, like, I found more after. I basically, because, like I said, there's so many damn colorless cards. I remember being on Scryfall for, like, a couple hours just scrolling pages and just being like, oh, God, I'm getting tired of this. So that at one point I was just like, okay, it's good enough. And then I was like, okay, maybe I missed some stuff. Let's go through again. And I actually went through every single page, which took forever. But once I got to the end of that, I was confident that I had picked all of the best cards, and I made cuts where it was needed. And then I played it in the tournament. So we're on revision. It was like on 2.0 at that point, I guess. Mm-hmm. And then in the tournament, I found that it did pretty well. Like I said, I won my first game. I ended up having a draw and then 2 losses. So I was on the outside looking in. I finished 7th overall, which isn't terrible for a first showing. And I don't think anybody's played this deck in a tournament yet, so that was cool too. It was kind of like people were like, "What is this card? What does this do? Colorless, ew!" And then it proceeded to put in work pretty well. So
I know it has seen play in some in-person events. In Philly, it's seen some play over there, so for sure. But
I hadn't heard of anybody else playing it.
Yeah, I believe it comes to one of the events there. Don't quote me on that, but I know it did well overall in one event there, but after that it just disappeared. It just poofed, gone. So.
And I wasn't able to play in Sanctuary that just happened a few days ago, so it just came too fast after the last one, and I was just like, I had other shit I needed to do that day, and I was just like, I'm not gonna bother. So otherwise I probably would have played it again, because I did make some changes after the tournament, because the Aether Drift set released and things became legal. And in that case, it was kind of a vehicle-heavy set, and then it made me... I was already running Thunderstill Colossus, because it's a 7-drop, it's a 7/7 trample haste vehicle, but it has crew 2. What's our commander? A 2/2. So it means that your commander does something besides just sit there and look pretty. Being able to crew this and swing with a 7/7 is pretty decent. But then they printed another one that I was kind of impressed with. It's the Skybox Fairy. So this is actually from the new set. It's a 5-drop 4/4 with flying, crew 2, but also has cycling too. So like if you get it at a point in your time where you're doing pretty well and you don't need it, or it's in your opening hand and you're just like, I just need to draw a card, get rid of this, pretty decent. And then I went through all the old vehicles and found that there was actually at least a couple that I liked enough to put in to try. So one of them is the Renegade Freighter, which gets +1/+1 and trample until end of turn every time it attacks, also crew 2. And Mobile Garrison. Whenever it attacks, you can untap a target artifact or creature you control, which could be useful. Also crew 2. It's a 3/4. So all of them were crew 2, and that was the thing. It was like, I'm using my commander to do this, because they're not going to use the Eldrazi's because they have no power. So, and that's one notable thing that I learned in the tournament too. I was playing, what's it called? Mightstone? The thing that gives all creatures +1/+0. Because I thought, these Eldrazi's are 0/1s. Maybe there's some world where I have a bunch of them, and I slam this down and just swing for like 7 damage because I have all these guys just sitting around, and now they're actually being useful and being attackers. I did not understand that card is symmetrical across the board. So I ended up playing into Lobber's flying fucking deck, and he got that benefit and just was smashing into people, and I was like, oh my god, what have I done? And I didn't have any removal for it at the time either, and I was just like, oh, I'm so stupid. So that got cut immediately, but yeah, I mean, it was just some new cards from the new set, and that was basically it. This is where it's at now. I have not play tested it since, because I've just not had the time, so definitely maybe try to get in. Shit, you guys play tonight. That's coming up in like an hour. Yeah, maybe I'll try to play tonight.
All right, so I think overall I'm pretty content with the way we spoke about the deck so far, Izlain. But I do have one very, very important key fact that I think is great for the ending of this. And you will have the perfect information for this, so I'm very excited to ask you these questions. So I'm going to run you through a few of these. I'm going to hit you with first this is going to be the overall subject. How does the table treat you in a tournament? Because I believe tournament is different than open play. And I want to know, from your perspective, has it been different?
Between casual and tournament, yes. In casual, I actually had more people come after me, which is ironic. In tournaments, people looked at it and thought, that looks underwhelming. I'm not worried about it. So it didn't have the Arabella problem, because when I was playing Arabella, everybody knew what it was, they knew what it was doing, and they would target me or they would remove it as much as possible. So I got to a point in tournament where I was like, I just can't cast her anymore, or I get her out and then somebody wipes the board, or whatever the case is. It was just not working, and it felt like it was because of how much I had played it prior to, and then also other people playing it or just seeing it around in the wild. Because like I said, it plays on a similar axis, but like people looked at the commander and they go, okay, you're going to try and burn. It's the same exact thing that you said at the beginning, is that you're going to try and burn me out, you're going to run out of resources, and we're not going to care anymore. Because it is a pinger in the sense that Arabella has the repeatable, I attack, all of my things get counted, I do the damage, I gain the life. With this, you have to have spells in hand, you have to have things to do. And that's why these things are great, because it's like you throw a chromatic sphere down, and then it just sits there. And when you need to draw a card, you draw a card. Same thing with the baubles and everything else like that. So like it has this different dynamic where it does a lot of different things, but it doesn't feel like you have that target on you immediately. Now, that could change if I kept playing it and people keep seeing it and know what it is, but to this point, that's just kind of how it's felt.
Okay, and that was specifically more generated toward casual play, or more generated toward casual? We mean casual competitive, where we're testing for tournaments, or more so in tournament play?
Well, I meant I was speaking towards the casual competitive, because on your server especially, like there's nobody that's really playing shit decks unless it is something completely experimental they're trying to prove, and everybody's just like, yeah, that ain't good, and then they go, yeah, it ain't good, and then they just don't play it anymore, right? So those kind of decks are going to happen. But like you said earlier, I did play it was either last week or the week before, and I got stuck in a pod against, it was like Malcolm and 2 other decks that were fairly meta. I don't remember what they were, and I managed to pull out the win. So yeah, if you get ignored, you're going to do pretty good.
I want to hear about your actual tournament experience. I want you to be able to tell the people that watch this what they can actually expect, because you have actively played this in a tournament already. Like, how were you treated at the table? Were you someone that was like ignored by the table, or were you just as threatening as everyone else at the table?
Well, I'd say from my perspective, I was just as threatening as everyone else, but that's not necessarily what other people thought. In game 1, I believe I was left alone enough to get to the win, because I was able to stay alive. Like I said, I played a campfire. I was able to just keep giving myself some life, keep myself healthy while whittling the table's life down, while other people were also, just doing stuff. Now, I talked about this when I had a conversation with Stein. He was in the pod with me, and because he looked more threatening, people know him, they know he's the Zada guy, he kind of had a target to begin with. And then, but then there's other stupid shit too, where I was like, I played my commander, and I can't remember the guy's name, and I shouldn't name names anyway, but he basically tried to make a deal with me because I played out Relic. And then I played my commander, and he was like, well, I don't want you to hit me with Relic ever, so how about I just kill your commander? And it was like trying to offer me something. I'm like, dude, you're not offering me anything that's worthwhile. And like, nobody has anything in graveyards yet. Like, why? What? And he was just like, fine, I'm removing your commander. And I'm like, okay. So I sat around for a while looking gimped because I couldn't really recast it right away. And then, started getting going and whatever. So I was kind of left alone and not really perceived as a threat until it was too late. And then by that point, the guy who made that choice was already dead. And then it was down to me, Zada, and I don't recall who the last player was, but I think they ended up dying, and I went to the 1v1, and I just happened to gain enough life to stay ahead of Stein. So ended up, and then I got to the combo, and then just won. And then game 2, that was a pod that I was in with Ryan and a couple other people. We ended up getting to time. It was close. Like, if I had like a couple more turns, I probably could have won, but we went to time. It just drug out. There was some stuff that was kind of like, not like slow play, like purposely, but it kind of felt like there were some points in the game where like people could have sped it up a little bit and maybe I would have been able to win, but it's what it is. I think I was respected more in that pod because Ryan's built that deck too, and he likes it, and the whole time he was just like, oh my god, this deck is so cool, man. I love this deck. And I was just like, yeah, it is what it is, and we played through the game, and I got the draw, and that was that. Game 3, that was the one where I dropped the Might Stone and helped out Lobert. And then Lobert was kind of like the threat for most of the game, but he kept me alive because I was giving him that buff. So he was just killing everybody else. And then it came down to, at the end, it almost went to time as well, but he managed to kill all of us at the end. So I think I was not really perceived as the threat per se either. And like I said, I think it would come down to me and or other people picking up the deck and playing it more. For people to really go like, oh, okay, this is at the table, it's a problem, we need to deal with it. So I don't think I wasn't necessarily ignored, but I also wasn't the biggest threat most of the time.
So let me ask you the question that's going to get you in trouble, and I think is a good way to end this. Do you believe that this deck is as threatening as other decks at the table?
Yes.
So you heard it first. Kill him first. No.
I mean, okay, so like if you're sitting at a deck with like a Weavers or a Gretchen and a Malcolm or anything else that's already certifiably top end, has won tournaments, is just a good deck, and you should be worried about it. This deck isn't going to get the attention because those decks are. However, this deck is the one that will win because you left it alone. So it's kind of a toss-up. Like I said, there were turns that I had in tournament and out of tournament where I've dropped 6 rocks, made 6 Eldrazi's, pegging the table for 6, and then had mana to keep going, and then refilled my hand somehow because I popped all the eggs that I dropped. Or I go and get lands, or I go and get this or that, or I sacrifice this thing and blow your thing up. And it's not scared of anything because it has the removal that can kill any threat on the table. And, like I said, built-in Edict fodder. The only thing that really is super threatening is a board wipe that does 2 or more damage. That's going to hurt. But other than that...
I think it's fair to say I do believe this deck is just as threatening as the other decks at the table, especially if one of your opponents is a red X deck that has pingers in it. If you have a red X deck, doesn't matter which one. It could be Xiao Jun all the way to Malcolm Breaches. You could go as far down the spectrum to Composite Golem with pingers in it. Doesn't really matter. As long as there's a red X deck there with pingers and this deck at the table, those are terrifying to me, in my opinion. And I do believe this deck's actually just as good as the other decks that sit at the table now, especially after seeing it play. It's very strange. Maybe you agree with me, Izlain. I used to think if this deck just drew an Ashnod's Altar and put it into play, it would be a joke. I'd be like, what is that card even actually doing? But watching you play and like seeing players just put one into play and just gain the value of pop draw, pop draw, pop draw, pop draw. And I'm like, holy crap, what just happened? I just lost 12 life in one turn. And then there's a Malcolm player across the table and I'm like, I'm at 10. I don't ever get to untap. Like I am literally dead. They're going to attack, hit me. Then they're going to ping the table and I'm not surviving this. There's nothing I could do to stay alive. So,
well, there is that kind of dual threat as well with having the top end, which I went. I wouldn't say super heavy, but I mean we've got. Let's see, about
You
2,
got some
3, 4,
fatties.
5, 6. We got about 7 fatties plus the couple vehicles that I described that are also kind of fatties, and they just get crewed by our Fleshraker, so they're basically free. And they don't get removed unless you crew them. And then even in the case of like, okay, you wasted your fucking premium removal spell on an Ulamog's Crusher. Well, guess what? Now here's a Hand of Emrakul. Have fun. Like,
Exactly.
You can shit them right back out. And then, there's not really anything in the way of recursion all that much, but you don't really need it when you're just shitting stuff out.
Yeah. I mean, I gotta say, I like the deck. Thank you for having me on. And yeah, that's all my questions I have for you, Izlain. I think we went through it very thoroughly. And if you guys actually have any other questions, just message Izlain. He's more than welcome to talk to anybody. So
yeah, we'll have the deck list in the show notes. Also, you can leave a comment here. Don't forget, like, subscribe, all that good stuff. I've got a Patreon. I also run editing for the Common Theory, which you guys can check out. I'm a guest on there sometimes too. So the content's out there if you want to find it. We're trying to put as much of it out as we can to try and just educate people about the format and give tips and tricks and all that kind of stuff. And I've just always been a sort of brewer at heart, so when you find a deck that you can make into something that's this powerful, it's a good feeling, especially having just anybody else recognize it is nice. So that's why I wanted to talk about it. We've already done the Arabella and the Silver decks. Those are the other ones that I'm kind of sort of known for. So getting another one added to the repertoire. One of these days I'm going to win a fucking tournament. I don't know when it's going to happen, but it's going to happen someday, and then I'll be able to notch that on. But for now, just being somebody who brews good decks is good enough for me. But Gator, thank you for helping me out here. I enjoyed answering your questions and talking about the deck, because it's a lot of fun.
Man. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, it was great. Well, I have some other things planned in the future as well. I'm going to be doing at least I'm trying to do like a couple of these a month. I don't know if that pace will keep up, but as much as I can, I'm going to keep trying to put out more Pauper content. I'm trying to do it without also stealing ideas from you guys. So, we can. I think there's enough to talk about out there that we can all exist. But
we got this.
I think it's been fun to add more to the conversation, and hopefully people enjoy it. So, well, that's all we have for today. Like I said, comment, like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Check out the Patreon, and we'll see you whenever the next one comes out. Until then, have a good one.